Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comments section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Carlos Eduardo Robledo Puc was born on January 19, 1952, in Argentina. His father, Victor Robledo Puc, was a technician who worked for the car company General Motors. His mother, Josefa Ida Habendak, was a housewife. She had moved to Argentina from Germany not long after World War II ended. The family had a history in Argentina that went back many years. Some of his ancestors were important people, including a man who was once a governor and another who was a military leader in the War for Independence. When Carlos was 4 years old, in 1956, his parents moved the family to a town called Olivos. This was in the province of Buenos Aires. They rented an apartment on the first floor of a building. There was a hardware store on the ground floor below them. Carlos's family was a hard-working, middle-class family. As a young child, Carlos was known to be shy and quiet. People said he was like his mother, who took very good care of him. He studied how to play the piano. He also learned to speak German during his childhood. He became a big fan of football and supported a team called River Plate. Carlos had problems in school. His school years were difficult for him. He developed a habit of stealing small things from the other children in his class. When he was 15 years old, in 1967, he stole money from the office of the school secretary. Because of this, he was caught and expelled from school. He was also bullied by other students at school. At home, his relationship with his father was not good. They had a hard time getting along. In December 1968, when Carlos was 16, he had his first problem with the law. He went into the workshop of a man who fixed bicycles. From this workshop, he stole a motorcycle. The police arrested him for this robbery. While he was being questioned, Carlos confessed to stealing things in more than 14 other cases. Because he was still a minor, a juvenile court judge sent him to a reformatory. He stayed there for 20 days. Towards the end of 1969, or maybe very early in 1970, Carlos met a young man named Jorge Antonio Ibanez. This meeting was very important for what would happen later. Ibanez would become Carlos's partner in many crimes. In the early part of 1971, Carlos and Ibanez started working together. They committed at least 4 robberies. They stole millions of pesos, which was a lot of money. They used this money to buy expensive things for themselves. In January of 1971, the police arrested them for one of these robberies. They were both charged with serious crimes. Carlos was released from jail not long after his arrest. However, a judge ordered him to come back to court for a hearing on a specific date. Ibanez was also released after someone paid money for his bail. Instead of going to their court hearing, the 2 young men bought tickets and escaped on a train. They went to a coastal city called Mar del Plata. After escaping to Mar del Plata, Carlos Robledo Puc and his accomplice Jorge Ibanez did not stay hidden for long. They soon returned to the northern area of Greater Buenos Aires. Their crimes quickly escalated from simple robbery to murder. On the night of May 3, 1971, around midnight, Carlos and Ibanez went to an auto repair shop in a town called Vicente Lopez. They planned to rob it. Inside, they found the owner of the shop. Carlos took out a gun and shot the man, killing him. The owner's wife was also there. Carlos shot her too, causing her serious injury. He then sexually assaulted her. A 10-month-old baby girl, the couple's daughter, was in a cradle in the room. Before leaving, Carlos fired his gun towards the cradle. The bullet did not hit the baby. The 2 men stole 400,000 pesos in cash from the shop and fled. The wife survived her injuries. 11 days later, on May 14, 1971, they committed another crime. They broke into a nightclub in Olivos. Inside a storage room, they found and stole more than 2 million pesos in cash. As they were getting ready to leave, Carlos noticed a door that was open. It led to a small room. He looked inside and saw 2 men sleeping. These men were the night watchmen. Without any warning, Carlos raised his gun and shot both men while they slept. He killed them both. 10 days after that, on May 24, 1971, they entered a supermarket, also in Vicente Lopez. A 61-year-old watchman was on duty. Carlos shot and killed him. They stole over 5 million pesos from the supermarket. Before leaving, Carlos and Ibanez found a bottle of whiskey. They sat down at the scene of the crime and drank the whole bottle together, celebrating their success. On June 13, 1971, Carlos and Ibanez drove onto a highway in Buenos Aires. They saw a 16-year-old girl. They forced her into their car at gunpoint and drove her to a quiet, isolated area. Once there, Ibanez sexually assaulted the girl. After the assault, he ordered her to get out of the car. Carlos then told her to start walking away and not to look back. As she walked, Carlos shot her 5 times in the back, killing her. Just 11 days later, on June 24, 1971, they did something very similar. They kidnapped a 22-year-old woman. She had just left her boyfriend's house, near the same area where the teenager had been killed. They drove her to another secluded spot. Ibanez tried to rape her, but was not successful. He then ordered her out of the car. Carlos followed her and shot her multiple times in the back, killing her. On August 5, 1971, Carlos was driving a car with Ibanez as his passenger. They were involved in a car accident. The accident was confusing and strange. Ibanez died as a result of the crash. Later, some people would suspect that Carlos might have caused the accident on purpose to kill his partner, but this was never proven. With Ibanez dead, Carlos needed a new partner. He soon met a man named Hector Somoza. Carlos and his new accomplice Somoza committed their first crime together on November 15, 1971. They broke into a supermarket. A 50-year-old watchman saw them. Carlos was surprised by the man and shot him multiple times, killing him. They did not steal anything from this location. 2 days later, on November 17, 1971, they broke into an auto agency. They stole 90,000 pesos in cash. A watchman was sleeping inside the agency. Carlos shot and killed the sleeping man. This watchman had previously spoken to people about his concerns. He was worried because several other watchmen in the area had been killed recently. The police were now beginning to notice a pattern. On November 25, 1971, Carlos and Somoza broke into a car dealership that sold Dodge vehicles. They stole 1.5 million pesos. Before they escaped, Carlos took the watchman to the second floor of the building. He shot the man 3 times, killing him. The last murder happened on February 3, 1972. Carlos and Somoza broke into a hardware store in a town called Tigre. They found the watchman inside. Carlos used his gun to force the man into a small room and locked the door. A few minutes later, Carlos returned to the small room, opened the door, and shot the man twice, killing him. After the murder, the 2 men tried to open the store's safe. While they were doing this, a confusing event happened. Somoza suddenly grabbed Carlos. Carlos believed that Somoza was trying to attack and kill him. In response, Carlos took his handgun and shot Somoza, killing him. Carlos was now alone at the crime scene with 2 dead bodies. He tried to hide what he had done. He found a blowtorch and used it to burn the face and hands of Somoza's body, hoping to make it hard to identify who it was. He then took some cash from the safe and fled the hardware store. In his rush to leave, he made a very serious mistake. Somoza had been carrying Carlos's personal identification card in his pocket. Carlos did not think to check for it, and he left it there with the body. The morning after the murder at the hardware store, on February 4th, 1972, the police arrived to investigate. They found the body of the watchman. They also found the burned body of Hector Somoza. While searching Somoza's clothing, they made a discovery. In his pants pocket, they found an identification card. The card belonged to Carlos Robledo Puc. This was the first real clue for the police. They now had a name connected to the scene. They went to the home of Carlos's family and spoke with them. His parents told the police that Carlos had been spending a lot of time with Somoza recently. The police now had a strong reason to believe Carlos was involved. They began searching for him. Later that same day, they found him and took him into custody. He had just turned 20 years old. Once Carlos was arrested, the police began to connect him to the other murders and robberies that had been happening in the area. They had a list of similar crimes. They had descriptions from witnesses. They had the pattern of the killings. With Carlos in custody, the pieces started to fit together. The police were sure they had caught the person responsible for a long string of violent crimes. Carlos's trial did not start right away. It took more than 8 years for the legal process to begin. Finally, on August 4th, 1980, his trial started. He faced a total of 36 criminal charges. Among these were 11 counts of murder. During the trial, Carlos did not show any regret. He was defiant in the courtroom. He called the entire process a farce. He blamed his first accomplice, Jorge Ibanez, who was already dead, for many of the crimes. A forensic psychiatrist named Osvaldo Raffo evaluated Carlos during this time. They met more than 25 times. Dr. Raffo came to a clear conclusion. He stated that Carlos was a psychopath. He said Carlos represented a real and continuing danger to society. Carlos would later accuse the doctor of lying and using him to become famous. The trial lasted for 4 months. In total, 92 witnesses gave their testimony against Carlos. On November 27, 1980, the 3 judges in charge of the case reached their decision. It was unanimous. They found Carlos Eduardo Robledo Puc guilty. They sentenced him to life in prison. Under Argentine law at the time, this meant he would be locked away for an indefinite period. It was the maximum punishment allowed. After the judges read the sentence, Carlos spoke his final words in court. He said, "This was a Roman circus. I was judged and sentenced beforehand." Carlos was sent to prison to serve his life sentence. On July 7, 1973, he managed to escape briefly. He was out for only 3 days before police recaptured him in downtown Buenos Aires. Over the many years that followed, Carlos remained in prison. In July 2000, he became eligible to ask for parole, which is an early release from prison. He did not ask for it. In 2003, he set fire to the workshop inside the prison where he was being held. He was briefly sent to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation, but was soon sent back to prison. In May 2008, he finally submitted a request to be released on parole. A judge reviewed his case and denied the request. The judge stated that Carlos was still a danger to other people. In the years that followed, Carlos made several unusual requests. In November 2013, he asked the courts to review his sentence. If they would not release him, he asked to be put to death by lethal injection. The death penalty is not legal in Argentina, so this request was denied. In March 2015, Argentina's highest court, the Supreme Court, rejected his appeal against the denial of his parole. In March 2023, he gave an interview from prison. He again denied committing the murders. He said he was constantly suffering and asked to be euthanized. In June 2023, another judge turned down his parole request once more. The judge's decision was based on new reports from mental health experts. They found that Carlos still showed signs of serious personality disorders. These included a lack of empathy, a large amount of rage, and paranoid thoughts. The judge noted that Carlos had not worked in prison since 1992 and that he refused to take part in psychiatric treatment. In November 2024, the same judge offered Carlos a chance to have more relaxed prison conditions. This would have allowed him to leave the prison for a few hours at a time. Carlos rejected this offer. He told the judge that he was used to living in prison and did not want to change. In March 2025, he gave another interview and once again asked to be executed by lethal injection. As of the year 2026, Carlos Eduardo Robledo Puc remains in prison. He has been locked up for over 54 years. This makes him the prisoner who has been held continuously for the longest time in all of South America. Story 2. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos was born on January 25, 1957, in the town of Genova, in western Colombia. He was the oldest of 7 children. His family was poor and life at home was very difficult. His father was a strict and violent man who worked hard, but also spent time with other women. His parents fought with each other constantly, using harsh words. Garavito later said his family spent all its time arguing and fighting. To escape his father's anger, Garavito and his brothers and sisters would often hide. His father did not show him affection. The only time his father spoke to him was to give him orders for work or to scold him. When Garavito was around 11 years old, in 1968, his father took him out of school after the 5th grade. The family needed money, so Garavito had to work. This meant he could not make friends or play with other children. He was kept away from normal childhood experiences to focus on earning money. At school, before he was taken out, other children had teased him. They called him Garabato, which means squiggle, because he wore glasses. He was bullied and preferred to be alone during breaks. He struggled with his school subjects. In 1969, when he was 12, his father took him to a local pharmacy for a routine vaccination. The man who gave the shot was a pharmacist who was also a neighbor and a very religious person. In that place, this man sexually abused Garavito. It was a violent and painful attack. After this happened, Garavito's behavior began to change. He became very withdrawn and quiet, but he also showed sudden, aggressive outbursts. Not long after the abuse, he caught and killed 2 birds, cutting them open. People who knew him said he seemed filled with anger, ready to take revenge on the world. He also began to act inappropriately with his younger siblings, though no one in his family understood what was happening to him. In 1971, when Garavito was 14, his family moved to another town called Trujillo. He did not tell anyone about the abuse he had suffered, because he was afraid his family would not believe him. Soon after arriving in Trujillo, a neighbor showed him pornographic pictures of women. When Garavito showed he was disgusted by them, the neighbor beat him and sexually assaulted him. Around this same time, Garavito started drinking alcohol with his family. In 1972, when he was 15, he tried to force himself on local women, but they rejected him. His behavior became too much for his mother. That same year, she threw him out of the house after he tried to sexually assault a 5-year-old boy. He was forced to leave again in 1973 after trying to attack a 6-year-old boy at a bus station in a big city. The boy screamed, and Garavito was caught by police for a short time. After this second incident, his father yelled at him, not for attacking a child, but for choosing a boy instead of a woman. His family rejected him completely for his actions, and he was left to live on his own. As a young man, Garavito moved from place to place. He worked many different jobs, including as a store assistant and a street vendor selling religious items. He tried to study marketing but could not keep a job because he would get into fights with co-workers, bosses, and even customers. He also had relationships with women, who were usually single mothers. When he was sober, he could be kind and acted like a good father to their children. But when he drank alcohol, he changed completely. He He became violent and abusive toward these women. He was very jealous and would insult them. Because of his drinking and violent temper, he was always causing scandals in the towns where he lived. His girlfriends would eventually force him to leave. In 1978, when he was 21, Garavito started going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He also became very interested in a Pentecostal church. He worked in a store and met his first serious girlfriend, a single mother named Luz Mary. Despite his religious interests, he still struggled with dark thoughts and violent urges. He was drifting away from his family, only staying in touch with one older sister, Esther. But even she kept her distance because of his drinking. In 1980, after losing another job due to fighting, Garavito tried to kill himself. He was taken to a hospital in the city of Armenia and admitted to the psychiatric ward. He was treated for depression and other mental health problems and was given medication. He told a psychiatrist there that he felt his life was worth nothing and that he wanted to die. When the doctor asked him why, Garavito said he wanted children, but he quickly tried to make it sound like he meant he wanted to have a family of his own. After a few weeks, he was released from the hospital and found a new job at a supermarket. He started another short relationship with a woman, but she left him because he did not have enough money. Feeling rejected and lonely, he began to spend his free time in nearby towns. During this time, in the autumn of 1980, he started carrying small weapons like razor blades and candles. He began to approach and sexually assault children he found on the streets. He would later write the names of these children in a notebook. At night, he would read the Bible and pray, trying to understand why he did these things. Even as he attended church, Garavito also became interested in the occult. He read books about astrology and tarot cards, and even studied Satanism. He was searching for an explanation for his own actions. In the 1980s, Garavito continued this pattern. He would work small jobs, date single mothers for a while, and then be thrown out for his violence and drinking. In between, he would seek out and abuse more children. He was hospitalized for psychiatric problems several more times. In 1984, on his 27th birthday, he was admitted again after a mental breakdown. He stayed for 33 days but ran away when he was given permission to leave for a short time. He immediately went to another city and abused 2 more children. In 1986, a man named Campo Elias Delgado killed several people in a restaurant in Bogota. Garavito watched the news coverage of this event in a bar. He felt a strong admiration for the attention the killer received. He began to fantasize about doing something similar, about getting a gun and killing his own father and family before killing himself. Despite these violent fantasies, he managed to start another relationship with a single mother named Graciela Zabalita. He moved in with her in the city of Pereira. He acted like a protector to her children and helped pay bills, but he was often absent. When he drank, his behavior became scandalous and aggressive again. His friends began to notice that when he was drunk, he was often seen with young boys at local motels. Still, no one understood the full extent of what he was doing. By the late 1980s, Garavito had been abusing children for almost a decade. He began to keep souvenirs from his attacks, storing them in black cloth suitcases which he left at the homes of the women he knew. Throughout this entire period, wherever Garavito lived, local reports of children being attacked would increase. Throughout the 1980s, Garavito had sexually assaulted more than 100 children. But by 1992, his urges grew stronger and more violent. He later said that simple assault no longer satisfied him. He began to think about killing. On the night of October 1st, 1992, Garavito was drunk in the town of Bolivar. He saw a young boy selling sweets and cigars. He decided to lure the boy to a wooded area, planning to kill him. But before he could get the boy alone, local police saw him. They beat him, stole his money and his ring, and let him go. This attempt failed, but it did not stop him. 3 days later, on October 4th, 1992, Garavito succeeded. He was in the town of Jamundi, drinking near a river. He saw a 13-year-old boy named Juan Carlos walking alone. Garavito later said that the moonlight reflecting on the water triggered a strange feeling of rage inside him. He bought a rope and a butcher knife, then approached the boy. He offered him a small amount of money to do some work. The boy agreed and followed Garavito to a remote area near the railroad tracks. Once they were alone, Garavito attacked. He beat the boy, tied him up, and sexually assaulted him. He then cut the boy's throat and mutilated his body. He left the body there and walked away. The next morning, he found blood on his clothes and claimed he could not remember exactly what he had done. But he knew he had killed someone. 6 days later, on October 10th, 1992, Garavito was in Tuluá, on his way to visit his sister Esther. He had been drinking brandy to calm his urges. When he saw a 12-year-old boy named Johann Alexander Penaranda, he attacked and killed him in the same way. He then continued to his sister's house as if nothing had happened. After these first 2 murders, Garavito did not stop. He developed a clear pattern for his crimes. He would travel to different towns and cities across western Colombia, moving constantly so he would not be recognized. He often dressed in disguises. Sometimes he dressed as a priest, sometimes as a teacher, sometimes as an old man. This helped him approach children without raising suspicion. He looked for boys who were poor, homeless, or working on the streets. He chose boys who might not be missed right away. He would offer them a small amount of money, candy, or a simple job. He spoke to them kindly at first, asking about their lives. Once he gained their trust, he would suggest they go to a quiet place together, usually a field, a wooded area, or a ravine. When they arrived at the isolated spot, Garavito would pull out a knife. He would force the boy to undress, and then tie his hands with rope or nylon cord. He often drank brandy during this process. Then he would torture the boy for hours. He used razor blades, knives, and sometimes a screwdriver to cut and stab the child's body. He would burn them with candles or cigarettes. He sexually assaulted them repeatedly while they were still alive. Garavito's violence was extreme. He would beat the boys, bite them, and cut off parts of their bodies. In many cases, he cut the boy's throat while he was still alive. After the boy was dead, he sometimes continued to assault the body. He would then leave the body naked in the field or woods. He often placed the body in a position that he later described as ritualistic. After each murder, Garavito would return to his room or to the home of whatever woman he was staying with. He would read the Bible, especially the Book of Psalms, and pray for forgiveness. He kept a blue notebook where he wrote down the names of his victims. He also kept souvenirs from the boys, such as their clothing, identification cards, and sometimes small bones. He stored these items in black cloth suitcases. He left these suitcases with women he trusted, including his sister Esther and his girlfriend Luz Mary. Between 1992 and 1999, Garavito continued this pattern without stopping. He killed boys in many different departments of Colombia, including Valle del Cauca, Risaralda, Quindio, and Cundinamarca. He would kill several boys in one area, then move to another town before anyone could connect the crimes. In 1993, he lured 8 boys between the ages of 9 and 11 from a school in the La Victoria district of Bogota. He took them to a nearby wooded area and killed them all. In early 1994, he tried to kill a boy who had been sleeping on a bus. He took the boy to a ravine, but during the attack, the boy grabbed Garavito's knife and cut his hand badly. Garavito was able to overpower the boy and kill him, but he was injured himself. In the summer of 1998, Garavito crossed the border into Ecuador. There, he killed a 14-year-old boy named Abel Gustavo Loerveles in July. A few weeks later, in August, he killed a 12-year-old boy named Jimmy Leonardo Palacios Anchundia in the city of Chon. Police in Ecuador had noticed a stranger with a strong Colombian accent begging in the streets around that time. They found the bodies of 2 boys and one of a young girl who had been killed in a similar way. They began to set up an operation to catch him, but Garavito fled back to Colombia before they could find him. Back in Colombia, the killings continued. On January 12, 1997, he killed an 8-year-old boy. In total, he killed at least 189 children in Colombia between October 1992 and April 1999. He also later confessed to killing 4 more in Ecuador and 5 adults in Colombia, though these adult murders were never fully confirmed. Not all of his victims died. Some survived their attacks. In 1979, years before he started killing, Garavito had attacked a 9-year-old boy named William Trujillo Mora. He held William in an abandoned building, torturing and sexually assaulting him for 12 hours. The boy escaped only when Garavito passed out from drinking. In the early 1990s, a 10-year-old boy named Carlos Alberto was lured by Garavito with an offer of money for work. Garavito took him to a hill, tied him up, and tortured him. After the attack, Garavito asked the boy if he had enjoyed it. The terrified boy said yes, and Garavito let him go, saying he would return the next week. Another survivor was a 16-year-old named Brand Fernie Bernal Alvarez. In the mid-1990s, Garavito took him from a cockfighting ring at knife point. He tied him up and tortured him, stabbing him 7 times with a screwdriver while assaulting him. Bernal managed to break free and run away. Despite these survivors, most of the boys Garavito approached did not escape. By early 1999, he had killed so many children that he began to think about doing something even bigger. He was tired of killing boys, whom he found too easy to catch. He started planning a mass murder. He wanted to kidnap several adults and kill them in a public place, attracting the attention of journalists. He thought he might die in a shootout with police, which he saw as a dramatic end. But Garavito never carried out this plan. His final attack happened on the evening of April 22, 1999, in the city of Villavicencio. He had been drinking brandy and saw a 12-year-old boy named John Ivan Sabogal selling lottery tickets. Garavito approached him, pretending to be a local politician named Bonifacio Morera Lizcano. He put a knife to the boy's side and forced him into a taxi. They went to a hillside on the edge of town, where Garavito forced the boy through a barbed wire fence. At the secluded spot, Garavito tied the boy up. He was screaming at him, asking if he was a sadist, and masturbating as he threatened him with the knife. But a 16-year-old homeless boy was nearby and heard the struggle. He began shouting and throwing stones at Garavito. Garavito chased the teenager with his knife, but both boys ran to a nearby farmhouse. A 12-year-old girl at the farmhouse saw Garavito approaching and gave him false directions into the woods, where he got lost. The children called the police. Officers arrived and began searching the area. Around 7 p.m., they found Garavito walking out of the woods. He gave them a fake name, but they did not believe him. They arrested him for the attempted sexual assault of John Ivan Sabogal. At the time of his arrest, the police did not yet know they had caught one of the most prolific killers in modern history. They held him for the attack on Sabogal, unaware of the hundreds of other crimes he had committed over the previous 2 decades. At the time of his arrest on April 22, 1999, the police in Villavicencio only knew Garavito as a man who had tried to sexually assault a 12-year-old boy. They held him in jail under a false name he had given. But in other parts of Colombia, a much larger investigation was already underway. For months, detectives had been finding the bodies of young boys in fields and ravines across several departments. The killings were so numerous and so brutal that investigators first thought they were looking for a group of killers, perhaps a satanic cult or a child trafficking ring. But as they examined the crime scenes, they noticed similarities. At almost every scene, they found the same type of nylon cord used to tie the victim's hands. They also found bottle caps from the same cheap brand of Colombian brandy. They began to believe they were looking for one man. On February 6, 1999, 2 months before Garavito's arrest, investigators made a crucial discovery. Outside the town of Palmyra, they found the bodies of 2 boys lying near each other in a sugarcane field. The next day, they found a third body just meters away. All 3 had been sexually assaulted, their hands bound, and their throats cut. At the scene, they found a pair of burned glasses, some shorts, shoes, and underwear. They also found money and a receipt with an address on it. The glasses told them important facts about the killer. They were a special prescription. The man who wore them had astigmatism in his left eye. The shoes showed that the man walked with a limp and was short, probably between 5'4" and 5'6". The receipt led them to an address in Pereira. That address belonged to Graciela Zabalita, the woman Garavito had lived with. Detectives contacted Zabalita. She told them she had not seen Garavito since December of the previous year, but she had kept some of his belongings. She gave the police a black cloth suitcase that Garavito had left in her care. Inside the suitcase, the detectives found a collection of disturbing items. There were photographs of young boys. There were detailed journals where Garavito had written about his murders, including the names of victims and tally marks counting them. There were receipts from different towns, bus tickets, and identification cards belonging to missing children. The suitcase was a complete record of his crimes. The police now had a name, Luis Alfredo Garavito. They went to his last known address, but he was gone. They did not know where he was. Then, just days later, they received word from Villavicencio that a man had been arrested for attacking a boy. The description matched. They traveled to Villavicencio to see the prisoner. When they arrived, Garavito was still using his false name. But the detectives were almost certain they had found their man. They needed proof. They remembered the glasses found at the crime scene in Palmyra. Those glasses had a very specific prescription that was rare. They arranged for all the prisoners in the Villavicencio jail to receive eye exams. They made it a routine check so Garavito would not become suspicious. The exam confirmed that the glasses belonged to him. Next, they needed DNA evidence. While Garavito was out of his cell for the eye exam, detectives went into his cell and took samples from his pillow and his bedding. They compared this DNA to samples taken from the bodies of the victims. It was a perfect match. On October 28, 1999, 6 months after his arrest, Garavito was brought in for questioning. The detectives confronted him with the evidence. They showed him the glasses, the DNA results, and the contents of the black suitcase. They read aloud the names of the boys whose bodies had been found. They questioned him for more than 12 hours. Finally, Garavito began to cry. He admitted that he had killed the boys. He said he would get drunk and then look for young boys to attack. He said he was not homosexual, but that he had been abused as a child and could not control his urges. He confessed to killing approximately 140 children in various locations across Colombia. Over the following weeks, Garavito worked with police to help them find the bodies of his victims. He led them to mass graves in remote areas. In the department of Risaralda alone, they found 41 bodies. In Valle del Cauca, they found 27 more. The final count of confirmed victims in Colombia reached 189, with 4 more in Ecuador. The total was 193 confirmed murders. Garavito was formally charged with 172 counts of murder. The investigation into his crimes was one of the largest in Colombian history. His trial began, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. He had confessed. He had led police to the bodies. His DNA was on the victims. The journals in the suitcase matched his handwriting. On November 4, 2000, the court announced its verdict. Garavito was found guilty of 138 of the murder charges. The judge sentenced him to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison. This was the longest sentence ever given in Colombian history. However, Colombian law has a limit on how long a person can actually serve in prison. The maximum time anyone can be held is 40 years. Because Garavito cooperated with police and helped them find the bodies of his victims, his sentence was reduced further. He would serve 22 years in prison. This meant he could become eligible for parole in 2023. Garavito was sent to a maximum security prison in Valledupar, in northern Colombia. He was kept in a separate area from the other prisoners. The authorities feared that the other inmates would kill him if they had the chance. His crimes against children made him a target even among murderers. In prison, Garavito spent his time making handicrafts like handcuffs, earrings, and necklaces in the medical unit. He suffered from several health problems, including leukemia and cancer in his eyes. The cancer eventually left him completely blind. He was weak and tired and needed daily blood transfusions. Psychiatrists who evaluated him diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder and noted narcissistic traits. Despite his condition, Garavito remained hopeful about the future. He gave interviews in which he talked about his plans after release. He said he wanted to become a Pentecostal pastor. He said he wanted to marry a woman. He even talked about entering Colombian politics so he could help abused children. These statements angered the public, who felt he should never be freed. In 2021, a judge blocked a request to release Garavito early for good behavior. The judge noted that Garavito had not paid a fine owed to the families of his victims. This kept him in prison. On October 12, 2023, Luis Alfredo Garavito died in a hospital in Valledupar. He was 66 years old. The cause of death was a heart attack, combined with the leukemia and eye cancer he had been suffering from for years. The families of his victims and the people of Colombia learned of his death. For many, it brought a final end to a long and painful chapter. The man known as the Beast had confessed to killing 193 young boys, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. His death in a hospital bed, after serving 22 years in prison, was the final point in a story that had caused suffering for hundreds of families across 2 countries. Story 3. Daniel Camargo Barbosa was born on January 22, 1930, in a small town in Colombia. His mother died before he turned 1 year old. Because he was so young, he never got to know her. After her death, Daniel was raised by his father. His father was a strict and emotionally distant man. He did not show love or affection to Daniel. When Daniel was still a child, his father married another woman. Her name was Dioselina Fernandez. She became Daniel's stepmother. Dioselina could not have children of her own. This made her unhappy and bitter. She took her anger out on Daniel. She treated him badly and found ways to humiliate him. One of the cruelest things she did was to dress him in girls' clothing. She forced him to go to school dressed as a girl. The other children laughed at him and made fun of him every day. This caused Daniel great shame and confusion. He felt alone and different from everyone else. Despite the suffering at home, Daniel was a very intelligent boy. He attended the Leon 13 school in Bogota, the capital city of Colombia. He was a great student and scored high on intelligence tests. One test showed that he had an IQ of 116, which is above average. He enjoyed learning and wanted to continue his studies. But his family did not have much money. When he was still young, his father forced him to leave school. He had to find work to help support the family. As a young man, Daniel lived a normal life in some ways. He entered into a relationship with a woman named Alcira. They lived together as husband and wife without being officially married. This is called a de facto union. Alcira and Daniel had 2 children together. For a time, he had a family of his own. But Daniel was not satisfied. He later met another woman. Her name was Esperanza. She was 28 years old. Daniel fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. However, he soon discovered that Esperanza was not a virgin. This fact disturbed him deeply. He became fixated on the idea of virginity. He believed that a woman should be pure and untouched before marriage. The discovery that Esperanza was not a virgin changed something inside him. He became angry and obsessed. Instead of ending the relationship, Daniel made a strange agreement with Esperanza. He told her he would stay with her, but only if she helped him find young virgin girls. He wanted to rape them. Esperanza agreed to this plan. She became his partner in crime. Esperanza would go out and find young girls. She would approach them and gain their trust. She used lies to lure them to an apartment. Once the girls were inside, Esperanza gave them sleeping pills. The pills were called sodium seconal. They made the girls fall asleep. While the girls were unconscious, Daniel raped them. They did this to 5 different girls. Daniel did not kill any of these victims. He only raped them while they were drugged and asleep. The 5th girl they attacked did not stay silent. After she woke up and escaped, she told the authorities what had happened to her. The police arrested both Daniel and Esperanza. They were put in separate prisons. This happened in Colombia. On April 10, 1964, Daniel was convicted of sexual assault. A judge looked at his case. At first, the judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison. Daniel felt relief. He thought the judge had been kind. He promised himself he would change and become a better person. But then a new judge took over the case. This judge reviewed the facts and decided the first sentence was too light. He changed the sentence to 8 years in prison. This made Daniel very angry. He felt the new judge had been unfair. His feelings of wanting to change disappeared. He became filled with rebellion and rage. He served the full 8 years in prison. When he was released, he was not a changed man. He was bitter and angry at the world. After getting out of prison, Daniel left Colombia for a time. In 1973, he was in Brazil. The police there arrested him because he did not have any identification papers. He was undocumented. The Brazilian authorities tried to get his criminal records from Colombia to see who he was. But there was a delay. The records did not arrive in time. So Brazil deported him. They let him go back to Colombia. Because they did not know about his past crimes, they released him with no further punishment. He used a fake name to hide his identity. When Daniel returned to Colombia, he settled in a city called Barranquilla. He found work as a street vendor. He sold television monitors on the streets to make money. He lived a quiet life on the surface, but his anger and his obsession with young girls had not gone away. They had grown stronger during his time in prison. One day, Daniel was walking past a school. He saw a 9-year-old girl. He decided to take her. He grabbed the girl and kidnapped her. He took her to a place where they would not be seen. There, he raped her. But this time, he did something different. He thought about the 5th girl from years before. That girl had reported him to the police, and he had been sent to prison. He did not want that to happen again. He decided that if he killed the victim, she could never tell anyone what he had done. So after he raped the girl, he murdered her. This was the first time he killed one of his victims. This event marked the beginning of his life as a murderer. After Daniel killed the 9-year-old girl near the school in Barranquilla, he ran away from the place where he left her body. He was in a hurry and forgot something important. He left behind the television monitors he had been selling. They were sitting right next to the victim. He realized his mistake later and decided to go back to get them. On May 3, 1974, he returned to the scene of the crime. When he got there, the police were already investigating. They saw him and arrested him immediately. His desire to not lose his merchandise led directly to his capture. The police charged him with the rape and murder of the 9-year-old girl. He was put on trial and convicted. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison. Later, this sentence was reduced to 25 years. On December 24, 1977, he was sent to a very high-security prison. It was located on Gorgona Island, which is sometimes called the Colombian Alcatraz. It was a harsh place far from the mainland, and escape seemed impossible. For years, Daniel lived in the prison on Gorgona Island. But he did not accept his fate. He began to watch the ocean very carefully. He studied the waves and the currents. He wanted to understand how the water moved around the island. He made a plan to escape. He believed he could use a small boat to float away. In November 1984, he put his plan into action. He got hold of a very simple, primitive boat. He launched it into the sea and paddled away from the island. The prison authorities looked for him, but they found nothing. They assumed his small boat had capsized. They believed he had drowned or been eaten by sharks. The newspapers reported that he was dead. But Daniel had not died. He had successfully studied the currents and reached the mainland. From there, he made his way to Ecuador. He arrived in the capital city, Quito, in late 1984. He did not stay there long. He took a bus to a larger city called Guayaquil. He arrived there on either 5 or December 6, 1984. He was a free man in a new country, and no one was looking for him. Daniel needed money to survive. He began selling ballpoint pens on the streets. He slept outside, on the streets or in parks. He was poor and lived like a homeless person. But his old desires did not go away. He wanted to find young girls again. On December 18th, just a few weeks after arriving in Ecuador, he traveled to a city called Quevedo. There, he found a 9-year-old girl. He approached her and used a trick to gain her trust. He pretended he was a foreigner who was lost. He told her he needed to find a Protestant pastor at a church on the edge of town. He showed her a large amount of money. He said he had to deliver the money to the pastor. He promised to give her a reward if she would show him the way. The girl agreed to help him. He led her into a wooded area, pretending it was a shortcut. Once they were hidden, he attacked her. He raped her and then murdered her. He left her body in the forest and walked away. The next day, on December 19th, he did the same thing to another girl. She was 10 years old. He had committed 2 murders in 2 days. Over the next 2 years, from 1984 to 1986, Daniel continued this pattern in and around Guayaquil. He attacked at least 54 girls. He always chose victims who were young, poor, and vulnerable. Many of them were looking for work to help their families. He would approach them with the same story about needing to find a pastor. He showed them money and offered a reward. The girls believed him because he was an older man and seemed harmless. People on the street saw an older man with a young girl and thought nothing of it. They assumed she was his granddaughter. If a girl became suspicious and refused to go with him, he did not force her. He simply let her go and looked for another girl. When he found a girl who trusted him, he would lead her into a remote area like a forest or a field. He told her they were taking a shortcut. Once they were alone, he would rape her. Then he would kill her. His method of killing was strangulation. Sometimes, if the girl fought back, he would stab her with a knife. After the victim was dead, he simply left the body where it lay, hidden in the undergrowth. He did not try to bury them or hide them deeply. The police in Guayaquil noticed that many young girls were disappearing. They found bodies in the forests. At first, they did not think one person could be responsible for so many deaths. They believed a gang of killers was at work. They were looking for a group of men, not one lone man living on the streets. This misunderstanding allowed Daniel to continue his crimes without being caught. He killed girl after girl, always using the same simple trick. He lived off the small amount of money he made from selling pens. Sometimes he would also sell the clothes or small items he took from his victims. He lived this way, hiding in plain sight, for over a year. His crimes continued until a day in February 1986. On February 26, 1986, Daniel was in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. That day, he found another victim. She was a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth. He used his usual trick. He convinced her to go with him to a remote area. There, He raped her and then murdered her. He took a bag with him that day. After killing the girl, he used a knife to cut a part of her body. He placed this body part inside his bag along with her clothes, which were covered in blood. He also carried a book in his bag. It was a famous novel called Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Just a few minutes after the murder, Daniel was walking along a large avenue called Los Granados. Two policemen were on patrol in the area. They saw Daniel and thought he was acting in a suspicious way. They decided to approach him and ask him questions. When they got close, they noticed his bag. They asked him what was inside. Daniel could not give a good answer. The policemen opened the bag to look inside. They found the bloody clothes. They found the body part of the young girl. They immediately knew they had found a dangerous criminal. They arrested him right there on the street. When they took him into custody, he did not give his real name. He told them his name was Manuel Bulgarin Solis. The police took him to a station and began to investigate who he really was. News of the arrest spread. A young woman named Maria Alexandra Vulles heard about the man with the bloody bag. She came forward to speak to the police. Years earlier, she had been attacked by a man who matched Daniel's description. She had been raped, but had managed to escape with her life. The police showed her the man calling himself Manuel Bulgarin Solis. She looked at him and identified him as the man who had attacked her. She knew his real face, even if he used a false name. This identification helped the police learn his true identity. Under questioning, Daniel stopped lying. He admitted his real name was Daniel Camargo Barbosa. He calmly began to confess to his crimes. He told the police he had killed 72 girls in Ecuador since escaping from the prison island in Colombia. He did not show any emotion or remorse as he spoke. He talked about what he had done in a flat, calm voice. The police needed proof. Daniel agreed to help them. He led the authorities to the forests and fields where he had left the bodies of his victims. Many of the girls' bodies had not yet been found. He showed the police exactly where to look. When they searched those places, they found the remains of the young girls. Some of the bodies had been cut with a sharp weapon like a machete. He explained his methods to the police without being asked to do so. He told them why he chose children as his victims. He said he wanted virgins because they cried when he attacked them. Their crying gave him a dark satisfaction. He also said he killed because he wanted revenge on women. He hated them because he believed they were not faithful or pure, which was connected to his anger toward Esperanza from many years before. In June 1986, a journalist named Francisco Febre Cordero wanted to interview Daniel. He worked for a newspaper called Hoy, which means today. The police were blocking everyone from seeing the prisoner. The journalist had to be clever. He pretended to be part of a group of psychologists who were allowed to visit Daniel. He went into the room with the real psychologists. While inside, he was able to ask Daniel many deep and searching questions. Daniel did not know the man was a journalist. He spoke freely. This interview later became famous and gave the public a look into the mind of the killer. Daniel's case went to court. In 1989, he was put on trial for his crimes in Ecuador. He was found guilty. At that time in Ecuador, the maximum prison sentence allowed by law was 16 years. The judge gave him the full 16 years. He was sent to a prison in Quito called the Garcia Moreno Jail. While in this prison, Daniel shared a space with another famous criminal. His name was Pedro Alonso Lopez. He was called the Monster of the Andes. He had also killed many young girls in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. The two killers were housed in the same penitentiary. During this time, Daniel began to act differently. He claimed he had found religion. He told people he had converted to Christianity and was now a changed man. He spoke about God and read religious books, but his past actions had not been forgotten by everyone. There was a young man in Ecuador named Giovanni Noguera. He was the nephew of one of the girls Daniel had murdered. He remembered what Daniel had done to his family. He carried that pain and anger with him for years. On November 13th, 1994, Giovanni was inside the Garcia Moreno prison. It is not clear exactly how he got access to Daniel, but he found him. He attacked Daniel with a knife and stabbed him to death. Daniel was 64 years old at the time of his death. The man who had killed so many young girls was himself killed in prison by a family member of one of his victims. Story 4. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born on October 5, 1948, in a rural area of Colombia called Tolima. He was the seventh of 13 children. His father, a rancher named Medardo Reyes, was killed in a violent ambush just 6 months before Pedro was born. His mother, Benilda, was already struggling. After her husband's death, she moved to her own mother's home in the town of El Espinal, where Pedro was born. Pedro's childhood was very difficult. The family was poor, and his mother worked hard as a laundry worker to feed all her children. Pedro later said that his mother had many partners, and that the home was filled with violence. He claimed that as a very young child, he saw things that disturbed him, including his mother having sex. His mother was also strict, and often kept him from playing with other children in the neighborhood. From an early age, Pedro showed a strong dislike for his mother, often telling her directly that he could not stand her. When Pedro was 8 years old, a serious event happened. His mother caught him touching his sister in a way that was not right. As a result, she threw him out of the house. For the next year, Pedro lived on the streets in the Tolima region. He was homeless and had to fend for himself. During this time, a man tricked him by offering him food and a place to stay. Instead, the man took him to a house and sexually assaulted him. At the age of 10, Pedro ran away to the large city of Bogota. There, he joined a group of other homeless children who lived on the streets. The group gave him some protection, but life was still very hard. He began using drugs like marijuana to deal with hunger and the cold. He also had to beg for money, and was sometimes attacked by other people in the city. When he was 12 years old, an American family saw him on the streets and decided to adopt him. Pedro went to live with them. However, he did not stay long. He stole some money from the family and ran away. He later claimed that a male teacher at a school for orphans had tried to touch him inappropriately, but the exact reason for him leaving the family is not fully known. Years passed, and Pedro's life of crime continued. In 1969, he was arrested for stealing a car. He was sent to a prison called La Modelo in Bogota. He was 21 years old. Just 2 days after arriving, 4 other prisoners attacked and raped him. Pedro did not report the attack to the guards. Instead, he decided to take his own revenge. Over the next 2 weeks, he used a sharp piece of metal to kill 3 of the men who had attacked him. The prison officials saw the killings as self-defense. However, because he had committed murder, even in prison, his sentence for stealing the car was increased. He ended up spending more time in prison for these killings. While in prison, he did not receive any real help or counseling for the violence and abuse he had experienced. Finally, in 1978, after serving his time, Pedro Alonso Lopez was released from prison. He was now a free man in his late 20s, with a long history of violence, abuse, and living on the streets. After his release from prison in 1978, Pedro Alonso Lopez began to travel. He moved through Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. He did not have a home or a steady job. He wandered from one town to the next, often walking or taking cheap buses. During this time, he started committing crimes against young girls. Lopez targeted a specific type of victim. He looked for girls who were poor, who were selling things on the street, or who came from indigenous villages. He believed these girls would not be missed or searched for by police. Most of his victims were between the ages of 8 and 12. He never attacked adults or boys. His method was always the same. He would approach a girl who was alone or in a quiet area. He would speak to her in a friendly way. He often offered her a small amount of money, usually a coin worth about 100 sucres in Ecuador. He would tell the girl he was lost and needed someone to show him the way to a bus stop or a market. Sometimes he offered candy or a small trinket. The girls, who were poor, often accepted the money or gift. They would then walk with him to a more private place. Once they were away from other people, Lopez would attack. He would rape the girl. Then, he would kill her by strangling her with his bare hands. He later said he strangled them slowly, taking about 15 minutes. After the girl was dead, he would stay with the body. He would hold the body and talk to it until it became cold. He called the dead girls his dollies. Then he would leave the body where it was, often in a field, under a bridge, or in an empty building. Sometimes he would return later to cover the body with dirt or rocks. Lopez claimed that he killed over 100 girls in Colombia alone. He also said he killed many in Peru. In Peru, he tried to take a 9-year-old girl from her village. The people in the village caught him. They beat him badly. They dug a hole in the sand and buried him up to his neck, leaving his head above ground. They planned to let him die there. However, an American missionary who lived nearby convinced them to let him go and turn him over to the police instead. The Peruvian police did not keep him in jail. They simply forced him to leave the country and go back to Colombia. After being sent out of Peru, Lopez went to Ecuador. He continued his crimes there. In Ecuador, the number of missing young girls began to rise. Police noticed that many girls were disappearing, but they did not connect the cases. They thought the girls might have been sold by their families or had run away. On May 5, 1979, in the city of Ambato, Lopez met an 11-year-old girl named Hortensia Garces. She was selling newspapers on the street. Lopez gave her money and she followed him. He took her to a place under a bridge near a river where he raped and killed her. Her body was later found there, held down by rocks and old newspapers. On December 14, 1979, Lopez was back in his hometown area of El Espinal in Colombia. There, he raped and murdered a girl named Flor Alba Sanchez, who was about 11 or 12 years old. He buried her body on some public land. Around the same time, 2 other young girls were killed in the same area. Their bodies were found later. One of them was a 9-year-old girl named Blanca Bautista. They had both been tortured. Flor Alba Sanchez was the only victim in Colombia that Lopez would later be officially charged with killing. On January 10, 1980, in a small town near Ambato called Totoras, Lopez saw a 9-year-old girl named Ivanova Hakame. She was walking to school. He took her to an empty shack nearby, where he raped and killed her. Her body was found over a month later in a public square in Ambato. During this time, Lopez was often seen at a busy market in Ambato called Plaza Urbina. He told people he was a street seller, but he never sold anything. Instead, he spent his time watching the young girls who worked at the market stalls. He would walk around and talk to them. Some of the girls noticed him. 2 young vendors, both about 12 years old, were offered money by Lopez to go with him. They refused and told other adults at the market about the strange man. They worried he might be a child trafficker. On March 9, 1980, Lopez tried to take a 9-year-old girl named Carmen Lazada from the market. When he tried to lead her away, she screamed. People nearby heard her, and Lopez ran away. Carmen told the adults that this was the same man who had offered money to her sister. A woman named Carolina Roman, who was a leader among the market merchants, saw Lopez run off. She tried to get other merchants to help her chase him, but they were too busy with their customers. Carolina ran after Lopez by herself. She saw him talking to another young girl near the market. He was offering her money to guide him. Carolina grabbed Lopez and shouted that he was trying to steal the child. At first, people who gathered believed Lopez, who acted like he did not understand what was happening. But Carolina insisted and refused to let him go. The crowd finally agreed to take him to a local police station. The police questioned him, but then let him go. There was no real evidence against him at that time. In April of 1980, heavy rains caused floods in the areas around Ambato. The rushing water washed away soil in some places. This uncovered the bodies of 4 young girls. They had been buried in shallow graves. The police saw that the girls had been strangled. They realized that the missing girls were not runaways. A killer was active in the area. The police began to take the disappearances more seriously. 3 days after the flood, Lopez returned to the Plaza Urbina market. He saw a 12-year-old girl named Marina Roman working at a stall. Marina was the daughter of Carolina Roman, the woman who had chased Lopez before. Lopez did not recognize the girl, but he approached her and offered her money to go with him. Marina refused. She went and told her mother what had happened. Carolina came out, saw Lopez, and immediately recognized him. She screamed and grabbed his arm. She told everyone nearby that this man had tried to take her daughter, and that he might be the one killing the missing girls. This time, the merchants did not hesitate. They grabbed Lopez and held him tightly. They did not let go until the police arrived and took him into custody. After the merchants at the market handed Pedro Alonso Lopez over to the police, he was taken to a station in Ambato, Ecuador. At first, he would not talk. He sat in his cell and said nothing about the missing girls. The police knew he was connected to the market incidents, but they had no proof he had killed anyone. A police captain named Pastor Cordova Godino decided to use a different method. He ordered that Lopez be placed in a cell with a man who was actually an undercover officer. This officer pretended to be a prisoner. For 27 days, he shared the cell with Lopez and acted like a friend. Slowly, Lopez began to trust him. He started to talk about what he had done. He boasted about the girls he had killed. He told the undercover officer that he had murdered over 100 girls in Colombia, more than 100 in Ecuador, and many in Peru. Lopez explained exactly how he committed his crimes. He said he would lure the girls with money or small gifts. Then he would rape them and strangle them with his bare hands. He described holding the bodies afterward and called them his dollies. He said he felt great pleasure during the killing. When the undercover officer asked why he did it, Lopez said he had lost his own innocence as a child and wanted to do the same to young girls. When the police heard this confession, they had doubts. They were not sure if Lopez was telling the truth or just making up stories. To prove he was telling the truth, Lopez offered to show them where he had left some of the bodies. He led police officers to a canyon near the Ambato River. Under a bridge, they found the body of Hortensia Garces, the 11-year-old newspaper seller. The body was still held down by rocks and old newspapers, just as Lopez had described. Lopez then led police to more locations. He took them to an empty house where another body was found. He walked them along highways and to fields near small villages. In total, police found the bodies of 53 young girls in Ecuador. Most were found in shallow graves near Ambato. Lopez told police about 28 other places where he had left bodies, but animals or weather had scattered the remains and nothing was found. Based on the evidence and the number of bodies, the police accepted that Lopez had likely killed around 110 girls in Ecuador alone. Lopez's trial began in Ambato in 1980. He was charged with 57 counts of murder. On January 27, 1981, he was found guilty of 3 of the murders. At that time in Ecuador, the maximum prison sentence allowed by law was 16 years. The judge sentenced him to 16 years in prison. He was sent to Garcia Moreno prison near Quito, the capital of Ecuador. Inside the prison, Lopez was not safe. Other inmates hated him for his crimes against children. He was stabbed several times by other prisoners. The guards had to give him extra protection to keep him alive. During his time in prison, he gave interviews to journalists. Sometimes he bragged about the killings. Other times, he changed his story and claimed he had only helped another man bury the bodies. As the years passed, people in Ecuador became angry that Lopez would one day be free. Lawyers tried to extend his sentence, but they could not change the law. Because of good behavior, he was released early on August 31st, 1994, after serving about 14 years. He was taken to the Colombian border and deported. The families of his victims were furious. Some had placed bounties on his head, offering money to anyone who would kill him. When Lopez arrived in Colombia, the police there had no warrant for his arrest. They kept him in a hotel in the city of Pasto while they decided what to do. The door to his room was left unlocked, but Lopez did not try to escape. He was afraid that if he went outside, the families of victims would find and kill him. After a week, a warrant was finally issued from his hometown of El Espinal. Police believed he was connected to the murders of girls there, including Flor Alba Sanchez. Lopez was put in a van to be taken to El Espinal. Along the way, a mob of about 2,000 angry people surrounded the van. They wanted to kill him. Police had to turn back and take Lopez to Bogotá for his own safety. Later, he was returned to El Espinal, where he stood trial for the murder of Flor Alba Sanchez. He was found guilty. A doctor examined him and said he had signs of mental illness. However, other doctors disagreed. He was sent to the psychiatric ward of La Modelo prison, the same prison where he had been held years earlier for auto theft. In February 1998, doctors declared Lopez sane. A judge agreed to release him on bail. The bail was only about 70 American dollars. He was ordered to report to authorities regularly and see a therapist. As soon as he was released, he disappeared. He never reported to anyone. Later that year, Lopez went to visit his mother. He asked her for money, but she was too poor to give him any. He took a mattress and a chair from her home, sold them on the street, and left. He was never seen by his family again. The last confirmed sighting of Pedro Alonso Lopez was on September 22, 1999. He went to a government office in Bogotá to renew his identification card. After that, he vanished. In 2002, police in Colombia and Interpol issued warrants for his arrest. They believed he might have killed again. In 2005, the Interpol warrant was canceled. Officials claimed that a dead body had been found and identified as Lopez. However, this was never proven, and many believe the identification was a mistake. Pedro Alonso Lopez has never been found. He remains a wanted fugitive. Some investigators believe he may still be alive and may have continued killing. Others think he may be dead. The exact number of his victims will never be known, but he is considered one of the most prolific serial killers in history. The story of Pedro Alonso Lopez ends with no final justice, only an open question of where he is and whether he is still alive. Story 5. Jairo Humberto Giraldo Marin was born in the year 1987 in Bogotá, which is the capital city of Colombia. His entry into the world was difficult from the very start. Not long after he was born, both of his parents left him. His father disappeared completely and was never seen or heard from again. His mother moved away to another city called Medellin, and she did not take Jairo with her. Because his parents were gone, there was no family member to take care of him. Jairo was left alone with no home and no one to look after him. He was forced to live on the streets of Bogotá. Living on the streets was very hard. He did not have money for food, clothes, or a safe place to sleep. To survive, he had to beg people for money or food. Sometimes, when people would not give him anything, he would steal what he needed. He also started using drugs at a young age, using the little money he got to buy them. When Jairo was only 8 years old, a very bad thing happened to him. A man on the streets attacked him and raped him. This was a terrible and violent event. It left Jairo feeling very hurt confused, and angry. He did not know how to deal with what happened. He had no one to talk to about it, no parent to comfort him or get him help. This memory stayed with him and troubled him deeply as he grew older. Because of his hard life on the streets, his use of drugs, and the trauma of being attacked, Jairo became very sad. He fell into a state of constant depression. He was unhappy all the time. Inside him, a strong anger began to grow. He started to blame a specific group of people for all the bad things in his life, homosexual men. He connected the man who hurt him when he was 8 to all gay men, and he began to hate them because of what one man had done to him. When Jairo became 18 years old, he was still living on the streets in Bogota. To get money, he began to sell his body for sex. This is called prostitution. While he was doing this, he met a person named Javier Fernando Guanga Villegas. Javier was from Ecuador, from a city called Guayaquil. Javier was a transvestite, which means he dressed in clothes usually worn by women. Javier was 28 years old, 10 years older than Jairo. Jairo and Javier started a romantic relationship. They became boyfriends. In February of the year 2002, Javier told Jairo he was going back to his country, Ecuador. He was going to the capital city, Quito, to have plastic surgery. Javier asked Jairo to come with him. Jairo agreed. He left the streets of Bogota and went with Javier to start a new life in Quito, Ecuador. After arriving in Quito with his partner Javier in February 2002, Jairo needed a way to make money. He went back to what he knew from the streets of Bogota. He started going to a public park in the city called Parque El Ejido. This park was known as a place where men would go to find other men for sex. Jairo would offer his services to these men, but he had one rule that he always told them. He insisted that he would only have sex if he could be the one taking the dominant role, the role of the man. He did not want to be in the passive role. On April 6, 2002, a man approached Jairo in the park. The man's name was Fidel Assad Banano Carriel. He worked as a manager at a bank and had a good job. Fidel agreed to Jairo's terms and took him back to his apartment. Once they were inside the apartment, Fidel changed his mind. He told Jairo that he wanted Jairo to take the passive role, the role of the woman, during sex. Jairo refused. Fidel kept insisting. This made Jairo very angry. The anger was sudden and strong, like an explosion. He was not thinking clearly. He put his hands around Fidel's neck and squeezed hard. He squeezed until Fidel stopped breathing and was dead. After the man was dead, Jairo looked around the apartment. He was afraid and did not know what to do, so he decided to take things. He grabbed any valuables he could find, like money and small electronics, and then he ran away. He went back to the park, back to his usual spot, as if nothing had happened. Only 6 days later, on April 12th, Jairo was in the park again. Another man hired him. This man was Carlos Abel Ponce Ponce. He was a scientist from Mexico who was working in Quito. He took Jairo to his apartment. The same thing happened there. The man wanted Jairo to be the passive partner. Jairo became filled with rage again. He strangled Carlos with his hands until he was dead. Then, just like before, he stole items from the apartment and left. The very next day, on April 13th, Jairo met a third man in the park. This man was Pablo Alejandro Garces Calero. He was a well-known and respected chaplain, a religious leader, in a neighborhood called Santa Rita. Jairo went with him to his apartment. The situation was the same. There was a disagreement about the sexual roles. Jairo strangled Pablo to death. He then stole things from the chaplain's home and fled back to the park. Jairo had killed 3 men in just 8 days. The violence of it scared even him. He told his partner, Javier, what he had done. They decided to leave Quito and go back to Colombia for a while, hoping to forget about the murders. They stayed there for a few months. In September of 2002, Jairo and Javier returned to Quito. While they were gone, people in the city's gay community had started to notice that some men were being killed. The first killing had actually happened in January, before Jairo even arrived. But now, with Jairo's 3 victims, there was more fear. Some people talked about it in online forums, saying they thought they knew who the killer was, but no one went to the police. They were afraid that talking to the police would bring bad attention to the gay community. On September 20th, Jairo went back to his old habits. He went to Parque El Ejido and met a 26-year-old man named Carlos Jorge Zavala Barona. Carlos worked for an insurance company. Jairo went with him to his apartment. He strangled Carlos, just like the others, and then robbed the apartment. On October 12th, Jairo was in the park again. He met a 23-year-old man named Ernesto Daniel Guzman Vera, who was an executive at a textile company. They went to Ernesto's apartment on a street called Gonzales Suarez Avenue. Inside the apartment, Jairo strangled Ernesto to death. After the man was dead, Jairo started to gather things to steal. But then, he heard a knock on the door. Someone was coming. Jairo quickly hid behind the door. A man walked in. This man was Ernesto's younger brother, David Suarez, who had come to visit. Jairo jumped out from behind the door and grabbed David by the neck. He held a knife to David's throat and asked him, "Do you want to live?" David was terrified and said yes. For some reason, Jairo let him go. He did not hurt David. He just ran out of the apartment and escaped into the night. David was left alone in the apartment with his brother's body. David Suarez was very scared after the man ran out of his brother's apartment. He looked around and found his brother Ernesto on the floor, not moving. He was dead. David immediately called the police. He told them what had happened and described the man who had attacked him. This was the first time the police were called directly to a murder scene from this series of crimes. When the police arrived, they began their investigation. They looked around Ernesto's apartment and collected evidence. They talked to David and got a full description of the killer. David told them the man had threatened him with a knife and then fled. The police needed to find this man. One important clue came from Ernesto's belongings. Jairo, before he ran, had taken Ernesto's cell phone. After leaving the apartment, Jairo started using the phone to make calls. This was a mistake. The police were able to track the cell phone signal. The signal led them not to Jairo, but to his partner, Javier Guanga. On October 22, 2002, police officers went to the Mariscal Sucre International Airport in Quito. They found Javier there and arrested him. When the police questioned Javier, he became scared. He told them that his boyfriend, Jairo Giraldo, had confessed to him that he had killed 3 men in April. Javier gave the police information about Jairo. 3 days later, on October 25th, the police found and arrested Jairo Giraldo. When they caught him, he was still wearing a leather sweater. The police recognized it. It was the same sweater that belonged to his last victim, Ernesto Guzman. This was strong evidence linking him directly to the murder. After his arrest, the police searched the apartment where Jairo and Javier had been living. Inside, they found many items that did not belong to them. They found perfumes, backpacks, and other personal belongings. They were able to match these items to the other murdered men. This physical evidence proved that Jairo had been in their apartments and had taken their things. The chief of police for the area, Colonel Mario Albarracin, spoke to the press. He announced that Jairo had confessed to killing 5 men in Quito. Jairo admitted to the murders of Fidel Bonanno, Carlos Ponce, Pablo Garces, Carlos Zavala, and Ernesto Guzman. Jairo was put on trial for his crimes. During the trial, psychologists and doctors spoke with him. They explained to the court that Jairo had developed a deep hatred for homosexual men. This hatred came from the traumatic rape he suffered as a child. The anger and sadness from his life on the streets built up inside him, and he took it out on the men who hired him for sex. The court found Jairo guilty of all 5 murders. In Ecuador, the maximum penalty for a crime is 25 years in prison. The judge sentenced Jairo Humberto Giraldo Marin to 25 years in prison. He was sent to a prison in Ecuador, where he remains to this day. After the trial, people in Quito's gay community talked about the case. A man named Francisco Guayasamín, who was a leader in the community, said that Jairo showed no sorrow for what he had done. He said Jairo blamed other gay men for his own painful life and killed them to release his anger. The families of the victims were left with the knowledge of what happened to their loved ones. The case was closed, but for many, the memory of the 5 men killed in 2002 remains. Jairo's violent actions, born from a childhood of pain and abandonment, finally led to his capture and a lifetime behind bars. Story 6. Manuel Delgado Villegas was born on January 25, 1943, in the city of Seville, in southern Spain. His birth was very difficult. His mother, whose name was Josefa Villegas, was only 24 years old. She died because of problems caused by the birth. Because of this, Manuel never got to know his mother. He was raised without her from his very first day. Manuel's father was a man named José Delgado Martín. He worked as a traveling salesman. His job was to travel to different towns and villages to sell a sweet product called a rope. This was a thick syrup made from fruit, and people in southern Spain used it to make desserts and sweets. Because his work required him to be constantly on the move, the father could not stay in one place to take care of his 2 young children. Manuel had an older sister named Joaquina. Their father made a decision about their future. He decided to send both children away to live with their maternal grandmother, their mother's mother. The children were sent to live in the town of Mataró. This town is located near the large city of Barcelona, in the northeast part of Spain. They lived there with their grandmother in a neighborhood called La Serrera. This area was mostly home to people who had also come from the south of Spain, like their family. This is where Manuel grew up. As a child, Manuel was sent to school. He attended classes like other children. However, he did not learn to read or write. These skills were difficult for him, and he never mastered them. His life at home with his grandmother was simple, but he did not have a stable family life with his parents. During his early teenage years, Manuel began to develop certain behaviors. He started to have sexual relations with other people for money. He was young, but he began selling sex to both men and women. He did this from an early age as a way to get money. When Manuel turned 18 years old, in the year 1961, he decided to join the army. He enlisted in a famous and tough military unit called the Spanish Legion. This was a very disciplined and physically demanding branch of the Spanish armed forces. During his time in the Legion, he received training in how to fight with his hands. He learned special techniques for hand-to-hand combat. One specific technique he learned was called the golpe legionario, which means the legionnaire's blow. It was also known as the golpe mortal, or the deadly blow. This move involved striking an opponent in the throat, specifically the larynx, with the side of the hand. It was a very dangerous technique designed to cause serious injury or death. He learned this skill, and it would later become important. After his time in the army was over, Manuel left his grandmother's home in Mataró. He did not settle down in one place. Instead, he became a nomad, which means a person who wanders from place to place without a fixed home. He traveled along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, moving between towns and cities. To survive, he did different things. He would beg people for money or food. He would also steal things. He frequently got into fights, especially with prostitutes and with men who were homosexual. Because of his wandering lifestyle and his behavior, he was arrested by the police several times. The arrests were made under a special law in Spain at that time. This law was called the Ley de Vagos y Maleantes, which means the law of vagrants and crooks. It was used to control people who were homeless, who begged, or who were considered to live outside of normal society, including homosexuals. Even though he was arrested, Manuel was never sent to a regular prison for a long time. Each time he was arrested, he would act in a strange way. His odd behavior made the authorities think he was mentally ill. Because of this, they would send him to mental hospitals instead of jail. But he would not stay in these hospitals for long. After a short time, the doctors would release him. This pattern repeated itself several times. He would be arrested, sent to a mental hospital, and then released back onto the streets, free to wander again. In 1964, Manuel was 21 years old. He was still living as a wanderer, moving from town to town. One day in January, he was near Barcelona, in a place called Garraf. He was on a beach called Lorac. On this beach, he saw a man sleeping against a wall. The man was Adolfo Folch Muntaner, a 49-year-old chef. The chef had come to the beach to collect sand, which was used in kitchens to clean grease from pots. Manuel picked up a large rock. He approached the sleeping man slowly. Then, without warning, he hit the man on the head with the rock. The man died immediately. After the man was dead, Manuel took his wallet and his wristwatch. The wallet had very little money inside, and the watch was not valuable. This was his first known killing. After this, Manuel continued to wander for several years. He did not kill again, according to the police investigation, until 1967. In June of that year, he was on the island of Ibiza. He went to a small holiday resort called Complanes, which was about 5 kilometers from the main town. There was a small house there where 2 young women were staying. One was a 21-year-old French student named Margaret Helene Therese Baudry. The other was her friend, an American tourist. During the night, Manuel sneaked into the house and entered the room where Margaret was sleeping. He took a pillow and pressed it down over her face. He suffocated her until she stopped breathing. After she was dead, he took out a small knife called a stiletto and stabbed her in the back. Then, he had sex with her dead body. Before leaving, he stole a medal that she wore around her neck. The next morning, her friend found her body. The police arrived and saw that the body had many bruises and scratches. Because the friend was the only other person there, the police arrested him. His name was Jules Morton. He was put in prison and stayed there for more than a year before the police finally proved he was innocent. In July of 1968, Manuel was in a town called Chinchon. He was near the Tajuna River. He saw an old man working in a vineyard. The man was 71 years old, and his name was Venancio Hernandez Carrasco. Manuel was hungry, so he approached the man and asked him for food. The old man looked at him and said that he was young and strong. He told Manuel that if he wanted to eat, he should get a job and work for his food, instead of begging. This comment made Manuel very angry. He attacked the man. After killing him, he put the body in the river. The body floated down the river and was later found near a dam called San Galindo. At first, the police thought the man had simply fallen into the water and drowned by accident. In April of 1969, Manuel was back in Barcelona. He had a regular client there, a man named Ramon Estrada Saldrich. Ramon was a furniture dealer and he was homosexual. He would pay Manuel for sex. The usual price was 300 pesetas. On this day, they were together in the furniture shop. Manuel asked Ramon to give him 1,000 pesetas instead of the usual 300. Ramon agreed, but he said he would give it to him after they had sex. After they had sex, Ramon only gave him the usual 300 pesetas. Manuel became angry. He hit Ramon in the neck using the Golpe Legionario technique he had learned in the army. This blow knocked Ramon unconscious, but he was not dead. After a moment, Ramon woke up and began to insult Manuel. This made Manuel even more angry. He grabbed a wooden leg that had broken off an armchair in the shop. He beat Ramon with the heavy piece of wood. Then, to make sure he was dead, he strangled him with his hands until his neck broke. Later that same year, in November, Manuel was back in Mataro, the town where he grew up with his grandmother. He was near a bridge when he saw a 68-year-old woman named Anastasia Barella Moreno. He picked up a brick and hit her on the head with it. Then he pushed her off the bridge. She fell down, but she was still alive. He climbed down, dragged her into a tunnel, and strangled her until she was dead. In December of 1970, Manuel was in a town called El Puerto de Santa Maria in the south of Spain. He had a friend there named Francisco Marin Ramirez. Francisco was 28 years old and worked as an electrician for the National Railroad Company. Manuel later said that Francisco made sexual advances toward him. In response, Manuel punched him twice in the head. The punches were so hard that Francisco died. Manuel left the body there. 12 days later, on December 12th, a fisherman found the body floating in the Guadalete River under a bridge called San Alejandro. The place where the body was found was about 12 kilometers away from where Manuel had killed him. In January of 1971, Manuel was still in El Puerto de Santa Maria. He met a woman named Antonia Rodriguez Relink. She was 38 years old. People in the town said she had a slight intellectual disability and was known to have many sexual partners. Manuel introduced her to his father as his girlfriend. One night, on January 18th, they went to a secluded area behind some bushes to have sex. While they were together, Antonia asked Manuel to do a sexual act that he did not want to do. He refused. She then insulted him. She told him he was not a real man, because other men she had been with had done this act for her when she asked. This made Manuel very angry. He took the tights she was wearing and used them to strangle her. After she was dead, he hid her body behind the bushes. For the next 3 nights, he returned to the body and had sex with it. He later explained this by saying that dead or alive, she was still his girlfriend. After Antonia disappeared, people in the town noticed she was gone. They had often seen her with Manuel. The police in El Puerto de Santa Maria heard about her disappearance. They brought Manuel to the police station to question him about where she was. At first, he told them he did not know. He denied hurting her. The police in El Puerto de Santa Maria continued to look for Antonia Rodriguez Relink. They searched the areas outside of town where she had been seen with Manuel Delgado Villegas. On February 21st, 1971, they found her body. It was in a hidden spot known as Pago Galvecito on the edge of town. She was dead. The police brought Manuel back to the police station. This time, they told him they had found the body. They asked him again what had happened. When Manuel knew they had found her, he changed his story. He confessed to killing her. He told them he had strangled her with her own tights during sex. After he confessed to killing Antonia, Manuel did not stop talking. Over the next few days, he began to confess to more murders. He told the police about killing the chef on the beach in Garraf. He told them about killing the French student in Ibiza. He told them about the old man in the vineyard in Chinchon, the furniture dealer in Barcelona, the woman under the bridge in Mataro, and his friend Francisco by the river. He described each killing in detail. The police listened and took notes. They had not connected these deaths before. Some, like the old man in the river, had been ruled as accidents. Now they saw that one man had done all of them. The police investigators from the Criminal Investigation Division in Cadiz worked on the case. A detective named Salvador Ortega spent a lot of time with Manuel. He was patient and gained Manuel's trust. Manuel seemed comfortable with the police. He called them by their first names. He smiled for photographs with them. He even put his arm around them in some pictures. The lead investigating judge was a man named Conrado Gallardo Ros. He decided that they needed to verify everything Manuel was saying. Over a period of 2 years, the judge and several detectives traveled with Manuel to all the places where the killings had happened. They went by car and even by airplane. This was the first time a serial killer in Spain had been taken to crime scenes by plane. At each location, Manuel got out and showed them exactly what he had done. He reenacted the murders. He explained his actions step by step. This process confirmed that he was telling the truth about these 7 killings. Because Manuel confessed to so many murders, the police investigated other cases he mentioned. He claimed to have killed 48 people in Spain, France, and Italy. He talked about killing a foreign woman in a town called Sant Feliu de Guíxols. He said he stabbed a woman in Alicante. He described strangling a homosexual man with a wire in Barcelona. He told a story about pushing another homosexual client off a cliff in Garraf. He said the man had commented on how beautiful the view was, and that he would not mind dying there. Manuel claimed he replied, "Die then," and pushed him. The police tried to check these stories, but they could not find enough evidence for most of them. They focused on the cases they could prove. In total, the Spanish police were able to investigate 22 cases that Manuel talked about. They officially considered him to be the definite perpetrator of 7 murders. During the investigation, one innocent person was freed because of Manuel's confession. The American tourist named Jules Morton had spent over a year in prison for the murder of Margaret Baudry in Ibiza. After Manuel confessed to killing her, the police had to accept that Morton was not the killer. He was released from prison and cleared of all charges. As the investigation went on, psychologists and doctors examined Manuel. They studied his behavior and his mind. They found that he had a severe mental disorder. He was not considered sane or normal. Because of this diagnosis, the legal process changed. In 1978, a high court called the Audiencia Nacional in Spain reviewed his case. They did not send him to a trial to determine if he was guilty or not guilty. Instead, they issued an order. The order said that Manuel Delgado Villegas must be held in a special hospital for people with mental illnesses who had committed crimes. He was sent to the Carabanchel Penitentiary Psychiatric Hospital in Madrid. He was kept there for many years. He never stood trial in front of a jury or a judge to receive a formal conviction for his crimes. In 1996, after he had been in the hospital for 18 years, the authorities decided to release him. He was not set free onto the streets. He was transferred to the care of a different psychiatric hospital, one that was not a prison facility. He lived there under medical supervision. 2 years later, on February 2nd, 1998, Manuel Delgado Villegas died in a hospital in Badalona called Hospital Conruti. He was 55 years old. The cause of his death was a lung disease. This disease was caused by his many years of smoking cigarettes. The man known as El Arapiero, who confessed to nearly 50 murders, died in a hospital bed, having never been convicted in a court of law. Story 7. José Paz Becerra was born on December 12, 1945, in a small town called Alagoa Nova in Brazil. His parents were very poor. His father's name was José Borges Filho, and his mother's name was Maria Paz. From the time José was a young boy, his family lived in extreme poverty. When José was still a child, his father became very sick with a disease called leprosy. The illness made his father weak and unable to work. Because the family had no money, young José had to take care of his father. His mother, Maria, had to find a way to earn money for the family to survive. She began to work as a prostitute. This was a very difficult and painful situation for the entire family. After some time, José's father died from his illness. With nothing left for them in Alagoa Nova, José and his mother moved to a very poor neighborhood called a favela in the large city of Rio de Janeiro. There, his mother met a new man named Severino. Severino agreed to live with them. He did not mind that Maria continued to work as a prostitute. However, Severino did not like José. He was cruel to the boy and beat him often. The situation at home became worse. Severino began to bring other men to the house to have sex with Maria, while Jose was in the room. Jose was forced to watch these acts. This caused great stress and confusion for the young boy. Eventually, Maria ended her relationship with Severino because of this behavior. She then found another companion, a man named Manuel. Manuel was not violent like Severino, but he also did not want Jose around. He made it clear that he resented the boy's presence in the home. Life with Manuel was not physically abusive, but Jose felt unwanted and unloved. When he was just 10 years old, Jose made a decision to leave. He ran away from home and began to live on the streets of Rio de Janeiro. He had no family to care for him and no home to return to. To survive, he sold candies at a large train station called Central do Brasil. He slept wherever he could find a safe place. During this time living on the streets, Jose began to show some strange behaviors. He started to masturbate very often and could not control the urge. He also did things that hurt his own body. For example, he would drive nails into his arm because he liked to see the blood. These actions were signs that something was not right with his mental state, but there was no one to help him or get him treatment. As Jose grew into his teenage years, his behavior led him to break the law. He started committing small crimes like stealing. Because of these minor crimes, he was caught by the authorities and sent to correctional institutions for young people. He was sent to these places many times, but they did not change his path. When Jose turned 18, he decided to join the Brazilian army. This seemed like a way to have a structured life. However, he did not stay in the army for long. He was accused of stealing small items from other soldiers. To avoid being punished, he deserted the army, which means he ran away and left without permission. After he left the army, there is a gap in the known information about his life. For several years, his activities are not recorded. The next time information about him appears is in the late 1960s, when he resurfaced in the city of Sao Paulo. In late 1969 and early 1970, Jose Paz Bezerra was living in Sao Paulo. He was working odd jobs and moving between different poor neighborhoods. During this time, he began to develop a pattern of violent behavior toward women, though no one knew it yet. The first known attacks happened in October 1969. At that time, Bezerra was living with a woman named Aparecida de Silva Oliveira in a place called Vila Mongalat, near a major highway called Anhanguera. On October 7, 1969, the body of a 44-year-old teacher named Sinaira de Castro Amram was found in an empty field near that same highway. She had been strangled. 11 days later, on October 18th, another body was found in the same area. This victim was a 40-year-old coffee vendor named Alzira Montenegro. Unlike the first victim, Alzira had been shot to death. Police did not connect these murders to each other at the time, and no suspect was identified. After these killings, Bezerra continued living a normal life on the surface. He got a job working as a scullery worker in a wealthy mansion in a neighborhood called Atame Bibi. He also continued his relationship with Aparecida, who worked as a maid in the same mansion. To those around him, he seemed like an ordinary man. Then in July 1970, the murders began again, but this time they happened more frequently. The first sign of trouble came on July 16, 1970. A 36-year-old teacher named Yolanda Pacheco hailed a taxi on Augusta Street in Sao Paulo. The driver was wearing a coat and a scarf, even though it was not cold. Instead of taking her to her requested destination, the driver announced that he was taking her to a different area called Morumbi. Yolanda became very frightened. She managed to open the car door while the car was moving and jumped out. The taxi sped away. She went to the police and filed a report, and they made a drawing of what the driver looked like based on her description. However, the police did not yet understand that this was part of a larger pattern. 3 days later, on July 19, 1970, police were called to a vacant lot in the Real Parque neighborhood, which was very close to the Morumbi area. There they found the body of a woman. She was half naked. Her own bra had been used to gag her mouth. Pieces of nylon stockings were tied around her wrists and ankles, binding her hands and feet. More of the stocking material was wrapped around her neck and body, showing that she had been strangled. Her face was bruised and swollen, making it hard to recognize her. While police were examining this crime scene, they made a grim discovery. In the same vacant lot, hidden in the weeds, they found the body of another woman in almost the exact same condition. Back at the police laboratory, experts used fingerprints to identify the two women. The first was 23-year-old Nilza Alves Cardoso. The second was 27-year-old Vanda Pereira da Silva. Both had been strangled, both had been tied with their own clothing, and both showed signs of sexual violence that happened after they were already dead. The killings did not stop. Later that same month, more bodies appeared in vacant lots across the greater São Paulo area. On July 19th, the body of Cleonice Santos Guimarães, a 23-year-old laborer, was found in a vacant lot near a major road called Via Anchieta in the city of São Bernardo do Campo. On July 20th, the body of Ana Rosa dos Santos, a 47-year-old domestic worker, was found in another vacant lot also near Via Anchieta. On July 25th, the body of Wilma Negri, a 35-year-old telephone operator, was found in a vacant lot in the Jardim Bonfilioli neighborhood in a district called Butanta. All of these women were killed in the same way. They were strangled. Their hands and feet were tied with pieces of their own clothes. They were gagged, often with their own undergarments. They were left naked in empty fields. The newspapers began to call the unknown killer the São Paulo Strangler. Police worked hard to find him, but they had no real leads. They did not know who he was or where to look. The break in the case came from a different crime entirely. On October 7, 1970, a burglary was reported at the wealthy mansion where Bezerra worked. Someone had stolen jewelry worth a large amount of money. The person who stole the jewelry was José Paz Bezerra, and after the theft, he fled and disappeared. The police arrested his companion, Aparecida da Silva Oliveira, who still worked as a maid at the mansion. They hoped she could tell them where Bezerra had gone. When police questioned Aparecida, she told them something they did not expect. She said that Bezerra was not just a thief. She claimed he was the man the newspapers called the Monster of Morumbi. She explained that one day, Bezerra had come to their home looking very upset and nervous. He was searching through drawers for money. When she asked him what was wrong, he broke down and confessed to her that he had killed 7 women. He then threatened to kill her and her 2 young daughters if she ever told anyone. Aparecida also told police about other strange things Bezerra had done. She said that he had once killed the family dog with an axe for no clear reason. He also told her that if she asked too many questions, he would cut out her tongue. Police searched the small house where Aparecida and Bezerra had lived. Inside, they found newspaper clippings about the São Paulo Strangler murders. They also found clothing, earrings, necklaces, and other personal items. Family members of the murdered women later looked at these items and confirmed that they had belonged to the victims. This was strong evidence that Bezerra was the killer. By the time police had this information, Bezerra was already gone. After stealing the jewelry, he had fled São Paulo. He first went to the city of Guanabara, where his mother and sister still lived. Police searched for him there, but he had already moved on. They searched in other cities like Recife and in the states of Ceará and Paraíba, but they could not find him. Unknowingly, Bezerra had moved to a new city called Belém in the northern state of Para. He arrived there in November 1970. He had traveled by hitchhiking with truck drivers along the highways. Once in Belém, he found places to live and began to blend in with the local population. But his pattern of violence did not stop. On December 23, 1970, police in Belém found the bodies of 2 women in a vacant lot near a radio station that belonged to the Brazilian Navy. The first woman was identified as 44-year-old Maria Teresa Marveo, a teacher. The second woman was never identified. Both had been killed in a manner similar to the Sao Paulo victims. After these murders, Becerra attempted to kill at least 2 more women. One of them managed to escape from him. The other woman, whose name is not known, actually ended up living with him for a period of time after the attack, which was a strange and unexplained situation. The final confirmed murder happened on September 21, 1971. Police found the body of a woman named Ana Belina Martins, who worked as a merchant. Her body was discovered in a vacant lot on Benfica Road, near a town called Benavides, not far from Belém. She had been killed in the same way as the others. By this time, the police in Sao Paulo had already identified Becerra as their main suspect and had spread his name and description to police departments all across Brazil. On November 12, 1971, police officers in the city of Belém were conducting routine patrols when they spotted a man who matched the description of the wanted fugitive José Paz Becerra. They approached him and asked for his identification. The man told them his name was Gilberto José Oliveira. He looked nervous, and the officers decided to take him to the police station for further questioning. At the station, the man continued to claim he was Gilberto José Oliveira. However, the police took his fingerprints and sent them to the Felix Pacheco Identification Institute in Rio de Janeiro. This was a central office that kept fingerprint records for the entire country. When the institute compared the fingerprints to their files, they found a perfect match. The man in custody was not Gilberto José Oliveira. He was José Paz Becerra, the man wanted for the murders of 7 women in Sao Paulo and Para. After his true identity was confirmed, Becerra was formally arrested and taken to the São José prison in Belém to await his trial. The news of his capture spread quickly. The families of the victims finally knew that the man responsible for their losses had been caught. While in prison waiting for his trial, Becerra attempted to kill himself. Prison guards stopped him before he could succeed. He was then placed under closer watch. During this time, police interrogators questioned him about the murders. Becerra began to talk. He admitted to killing many women, not just the 7 the police knew about. He claimed that between 1966 and 1971, he had murdered 24 women in total. He told interrogators that these women had been in relationships with him. He said he used his charm and his looks to gain their trust and lure them to isolated places where he could attack them. Despite his confession to 24 murders, the police and prosecutors could only gather enough solid evidence to charge him with 7 specific killings. These were the cases where they had physical proof, witness statements, or items belonging to the victims that were found in his possession. The other cases he confessed to could not be proven in court, so they were not part of the official charges. Before the trial, a team of psychiatrists examined Becerra to understand his mental state. They determined that he had a deep and powerful hatred for women. The doctors believed this hatred likely came from his childhood experiences, particularly from watching his mother have sex with many different men when he was a young boy. This examination helped the court understand his motives, but it did not excuse his actions. The trial took place, and the evidence against Becerra was strong. There were the personal items of the victims found in his home. There was the testimony of Aparecida de Silva Oliveira, who told the court about his confession to her. There were the fingerprint matches and the police reports from the crime scenes. The jury found him guilty of all 7 murders. The judge sentenced him to 100 years in prison. Becerra began serving his sentence in the São José prison in Belém. In 1979, after 8 years in that facility, he was transferred to a prison in São Paulo to continue serving his time. He remained in the São Paulo prison system for many years. Under Brazilian law at that time, no person could be held in prison for more than 30 years, no matter how long their sentence was. This was the maximum time allowed by law. Because Becerra had been in prison since his arrest in November 1971, he reached the 30-year limit on November 19, 2001. At that point, he was 56 years old, and the prison was required by law to release him. A few days after his release, Becerra gave a telephone interview to a newspaper called Agora. In this interview, he said that his time in prison had given him a chance to think about his life and what he had done. He claimed that he was now a changed man and that he felt reformed. After his release, José Paz Becerra disappeared from public view. It is believed that he is still alive today, but he is presumed to be living under a new name to hide his identity as a convicted serial killer. The man known as the Monster of Marumbi walked out of prison a free man and was never heard from again.